One of the topics that frequently comes up in the LHON community is that of employment. Individuals who suddenly lose sight while working often cannot imagine how they can continue their job, so they often resign. And only much later do they learn that there are laws in place to protect individuals impacted by legal blindness and programs available to support them in obtaining the accommodations required to maintain their jobs successfully, and that they can do many, many different types of jobs. The Job Accommodation Network, JAN, is the leading source of information on workplace accommodations and disability employment issues. Maria and I met with JAN's team leader for sensory disabilities, including vision loss, Teresa Goddard, to explain the career issues we hear about from the LHON community, and asked her to come here and provide an overview of how JAN can be helpful to employees and employers, and to describe how to request and negotiate accommodations. Please welcome Teresa Goddard.
So good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so nice to be here with you, and it was very nice meeting so many of you last night. I'd like to thank Alyssa and also Maria for helping me to prepare for this session and for inviting Jan to be a part of your event. And I'd also like to thank those of you who called in to the Job Accommodation Network this spring to help me understand your stories and the types of things that you were experiencing in the workplace. So today I'm going to be talking about obtaining or maintaining employment and the things that you can do to advocate for yourselves as part of this process. First, I want to tell you just a little bit about the Job Accommodation Network. We've been around for over 30 years. JAN has actually existed slightly longer than the Americans with Disabilities Act, Title I of which protects you in the workplace. And we offer free consultation to anybody who would like to call us regarding job accommodation, regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, and an older, very similar law for the federal employees that's called the Rehabilitation Act. And also, we have a team that deals with entrepreneurship. So if you're thinking you may want to change your career, or if you're starting out for the first time and have an idea for being in self-employment or starting your own business, we do have a small team that works on those issues as well. Things like helping you find a mentor, find resources for how to write a business plan, and those types of things. But we're free, we're national, anyone in the US can call us. We occasionally even get emails from outside the US. We try to be as easy to use as possible. Just call and tell us what you're facing, and we'll try to help you find what you need. And everything that we do is confidential. So for the employers, we kind of help them meet all those timelines that are built into laws like the Rehabilitation Act, but we also provide comprehensive resources to individuals with disabilities who contact us and maintain their confidentiality. You're going to see some case studies from what we call the JAN study, but those are all from people or companies who opted in to that study and agreed to have this information used. But you won't see anything that would identify anyone. And because this is such a small community, I did not include anyone who specifically told me they had LHON so that I wouldn't be accidentally compromising anyone's confidentiality at this event. But what you will see are some cases that mirror the types of experiences that those who called in told me about. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about JAN. I'm going to tell you a little bit about reasonable accommodations, what the term reasonable means, some typical types of accommodations. Then I'm going to get into what we call the interactive process, which is a technical term, kind of a legal term, that means the process of asking for what you need at work and negotiating for it. It's something that the place that enforces Title I of the ADA recommends, but doesn't technically require. But you'll find that most employers kind of try to follow that model. Then we'll talk about some JAN study examples. So what is a reasonable accommodation? Does anyone have an idea of what that might mean when I say reasonable accommodation? It basically means any change in the workplace or in the way things are done in a workplace that results in a person with a disability, whether it's something with a LHON or another type of visual disability or something else like wheelchair use, that enables that person to have an equal employment opportunity, equal access to the benefits and privileges of working, like, restrooms, company parties, etc., and also equal access to just having that job or having a chance to compete for that job. So it can mean any change. But when it comes to this word reasonable, the place that wrote this definition doesn't tell us a lot about what reasonable means. They say reasonable means reasonable on its face, ordinarily, or in the run of cases. So reasonable means reasonable. People always want me to pin it down and define it more, but I really can't because the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which wrote this passage, didn't. So next we're going to talk about just a few typical things. You're probably already aware of these from your own experiences or your family's experiences, but job functions, things that have to be done on the job that typically require accommodation among all individuals with vision impairments are things like reading printed materials or reading handwritten notes, reading an agenda at a meeting. Accessing a computer, that's probably my number one. I get more calls about that with questions about accessing a computer than anything else. Writing notes and completing forms. Now, you'd think everybody'd be digital by now, but they're not. Accessing a telephone. You'd be surprised how many calls we get that relate to not being able to see the small screen that's on everybody's desk phone at work. Working with money. Reading from some other type of instrument or control board. We have a fellow who's a blind machinist who calls us regularly because of issues with this. Assembling pieces or parts, that's kind of for people in manufacturing or people with a home business involving jewelry making. And mobility, travel, commuting. And some of the typical ways to accommodate those things are to figure out what type of assistive technology might help. Now, what's assistive technology? Assistive technology is any piece of technology, whether it's an app on your smartphone or something that's custom built for people with vision impairments, like some type of specialized software or specialized equipment that helps a person with a disability to function, to improve how they're functioning in their daily life, in work, and out in the community. Something that an employer can do is provide that assistive technology that's needed on the job. So if you need software to access your computer, an employer can provide that and may have an obligation to provide that. Providing information in forms and alternate formats. That means if you have computer software to help you see on the computer, but you have difficulty with a printed out paper form, you can ask your employer to give you that in digital format, like a Word document. Or if you need it to be enlarged, you need your agendas for your meetings to be enlarged, you can ask for that. Providing qualified readers and scribes, that means a person who can sit with you and read and type those things that need to be done that can't be done in another way. Modifying training materials, we're going to talk about that in a moment. Modifying policies, modifying schedules so that you can use the form of transportation that works for you, and allowing use of service animals. Those are just the big picture typical ones. This is a publication that is on the JAN website where if you really want to go in depth and learn about different accommodation approaches, you can do that on your own. It's called Employees with Vision Impairments, and you can find that online at askjan.org. askjan.org. And while you guys are writing that down, if you do want a copy of today's slides, you can go to askjan.org/landing page, LANDINGPAGE /LHON 2017. And you should be able to get today's slides. So next I want to talk about pre-employment requests. Many people don't realize that they have different rights to confidentiality and to protection from employers' questions about their condition at the pre-employment stage than when you're already on the job. And this is important because from the people in this group who contacted me, I talked to some who had their own business. I talked to some who were affected while they were working, kind of mid-career. And I talked to a few who were affected just as they were leaving college or preparing to leave college and just about to jump into the workforce for the first time. When you're applying for a job, up until the point that an employer makes a job offer, they're very limited in what they can ask you regarding any medical condition that you may have, because Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act protects you from questions that could elicit information about your disability. However, employers can ask employees to participate in non-medical pre-employment tests, and they can also ask all applicants for a position to explain or demonstrate how they would do part of the job. If they know someone has a disability because the person has mentioned it, or the person has asked for an accommodation for the interview, like asked for a sighted guide to bring them to the interview room, for instance, that's considered a known disability. If there's a known disability, a prospective employer can ask that individual person to explain or demonstrate how they would do part of the job, even if they're not asking anybody else. So many people think that employers are completely restricted from asking anything disability related before a job offer is made, and that's an overstatement. They can ask for an explanation or demonstration of how you would do the job, and if you need an accommodation to demonstrate, it's probably best to mention it. They can ask you to complete a pre-employment test. If you need an accommodation to do something like a typing test, you'll need to ask for it. So those are just some things to be aware of. Now, if an employer is going to do something like a typing test or another type of computer-related test, they should tell the applicants in advance, and the applicant is then responsible for asking for what they need. You can ask verbally, it can be in person, it can be over the phone, it can be in writing, in an email. Any of those methods is okay to initiate the process of asking for what you need. Now, as for tests, if a test screens out or tends to screen out somebody with a disability on the basis of their disability, then it needs to be what we call job-related and consistent with business necessity. So if you're taking an employment test that looks like it's going to screen you out, think about whether or not it's related to the job for which you're applying. If it's not, you might need to call the EEOC to file a complaint. Or you might need to call me and talk it over. I'll talk about the complaint process a little farther on. And if there is a test that's being given to someone who has an impaired sensory skill, like a vision loss or a hearing loss, the ADA requires that tests be given to people who have impaired sensory, speaking, or manual skills in a format and manner that does not require use of the impaired skill, unless the test is designed to measure that skill. So if a test is designed to measure your ability to spot things that are happening, say, far away, this sometimes happens with people applying for work in the corrections field. Yeah, you might have to use your vision to do that test. But if it's something like a typing test, where you could get information about what they want you to type through your ears or through Braille or through another method, don't know what that would be, but one of those two is typical, then they shouldn't require you to look at a screen and type from a screen. You should be allowed to get that information into your brain, into your fingers in a different way. If that's confusing, I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on it today, but I'd be happy to talk with you about it on the phone anytime. So let's talk about an example. Oh, sorry. First, employees with disabilities that might make it hard to do a training. We're going to switch gears and talk about training just briefly. You may be in a situation where you have to complete a training program at your workplace, or even a pre-employment training. You can ask for accommodations to participate in training. You should ask as soon as you realize you're going to need something. So if you need enlarged materials, you should ask for them as soon as you need. If you need a digital format instead of a printout, you should ask for that as soon as you realize it. And again, you can ask verbally or in writing. So this is something that has actually happened a lot. This is an example based on real Jan calls. Somebody couldn't do a typing test that they had to do in order to be considered for a job because He used assistive technology. He used a program that read from his computer called JAWS, just like the shark movie, JAWS. And it didn't work with the typing test software that the employer was using. They just weren't compatible. So the employer said, well, okay, if this won't work for you, what if we have someone sit with you and read the screen? But the applicant was like, that's not really going to give you a true picture of my typing ability, because JAWS can read really fast, and it reads words the same way every time. So if I have to listen to a person reading this passage, you're not going to get a true picture of my skill. They won't be able to read fast enough or consistently enough, and I won't be used to them in the same way that I am to my software. So in this particular case, the person was working with an organization called Vocational Rehabilitation that helps people with disabilities with job placement and training. They had a counselor through the state, and they were able to provide a proctored test using an accessible typing program that worked with his JAWS. It was probably the one called Typeability. So if you're ever in a similar situation, ask somebody about Typeability. And if you want to go a little deeper, we do have a publication specifically on testing accommodations. And this is a screenshot from the JAN website. If you go to askjan.org, you're going to find a lot of information, not just about how to ask for what you need, but also about things for which you might ask. This is a screenshot of our page on low vision enhancement products. In recent years, we've seen a lot of growth in the number and variety of pieces of technology designed to assist people with varying degrees of vision loss in getting through their work and their daily lives. One of the first things on this list is called IRA. Has anyone heard of IRA? Yes, yes. It's amazing, quite frankly. It's a little side piece that affixes to glasses. There's a camera on it, and it has firmware that connects to your smartphone. So you would use this with a smartphone, and you pay a monthly subscription fee. It could be as low as $89 a month, which I know is not that low. Or they have plans that go all the way up to over $300 a month. But depending on what plan you get so many minutes a month to contact a representative in a call center who can see a video feed of where you are, who can see things like your social media site, Facebook, let's say, who can see where you're located on Google Maps, and can help you to navigate. So on their website, they've got a video showing a guy walking down the street. He's doing great, but there's construction. The sidewalk is closed right in front of where he needs to walk. So he contacts his IRA rep for assistance in finding a new route. I've talked to vocational rehabilitation counselors who themselves are legally blind, who are using this in their own daily lives and in their work. And it's a marvelous tool, but it's pricey. If you need it for work, and especially if you work for a larger company or a large employer like a university, there is a chance you may be able to request it as an accommodation and get them to purchase it if it's needed for work. Some people are also getting it through the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services in their state, but because it's pricey, it's harder to get through there. They have a limited pot of money. But when you're asking for your employer for something, if they're deciding if it's too expensive or not, they're supposed to consider their total financial resources. So there's a chance. Anyway, if you go to low vision enhancement products on our website, you'll see contact information for the company that makes IRA, for the company that makes OrCam. Do we know OrCam? Yeah? The glasses that have screen reading abilities, or you can even hold up a piece of paper and it will read it to you. OrCam also can be programmed for facial recognition. It's a great tool. You can find information about all of those companies and many more similar products on this page of our website. If you can't find it, call me. So this is a screenshot of the IRA website. There is a picture of a person wearing the device. This is a screenshot of the OrCam website. They have a nice blog where users tell their stories of how they used it. This is a screenshot of an article by someone who's using it to read poetry. All right, now we're going to get into the interactive process. So the interactive process is something that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission wants employers to do. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission enforces Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which protects your rights in the workplace. If you have a complaint about what an employer is doing, that's where you would file your complaint. And if you want to know the regs about how the ADA is to be applied, you would go to eeoc.gov, their website. This is something that the EEOC recommends but does not require. So if your employer doesn't follow all 6 steps exactly, it's not necessarily a violation. But the purpose of having a process and why Jan encourages employers to implement a process is for consistency and to show good faith effort to meet employees' needs. To make life simpler, Jan has developed our 6-step interactive process that we're trying to train employers across the country on how to use. We're going to go through each of these steps in detail. Step 1 would be making an accommodation request. That's your step as an employee with a disability. It's what you need to do. Some tips to make a good, successful request are for you to learn as much as you can about your rights under Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act. To document your request, keep a copy of your email if you do it by email. Write a memorandum to yourself if you do it verbally or over the phone. Make sure you note the date, the time, and who you spoke with in a sentence or two about what it was about, because you may need this later on as you're advocating for yourself. Here's an example. An employee's been out of work about 6 months. They've got a medical condition. They don't say exactly what it is, but the doctor sends the employer a letter saying that they can come back to work, but they have some restrictions. World's biggest letter. You'd think a letter like this would never happen, but let me tell you, it does. Did this person make an accommodation request under Title I of the ADA? Yes. The bare minimum to start the process is for an employee to say, I need something changed, and it's because of a medical condition. It's for a medical reason. That's the bare minimum that you need to do in order to get the attention of your company's HR department, and in order for it to be a valid request under Title I of the ADA. We suggest doing this by writing a letter or an email, and then we have a publication called Ideas for Writing an Accommodation Request Letter. It's in the employee section of askjan.org. We also put together a Q&A of the most common questions about asking for an accommodation or requesting one. It's in our article called Employees' Practical Guide to Requesting and Negotiating Reasonable Accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The next step is to provide the employer with information to understand what you're experiencing and to understand what accommodations might work for you, what software, what hardware, what other changes. You want to make sure you're describing the difficulty that you're having. We say describe the limitation, which means the employer might need to understand exactly how much you're seeing or not seeing. And this is your chance to suggest or have your doctor suggest what they would like to see done differently at work. So if you need Zoom text, screen magnification software so that you can do your job, this is a good time for you and the doctor to mention that. It doesn't have to be a doctor. It could be a vision rehabilitation therapist, a rehabilitation counselor. Any qualified medical professional could do this part for you or help you with it. Medical inquiry in response to an accommodation request outlines your rights as part of this process and how much you have to say, what you don't have to say. Practical guidance for medical professionals, that's a document that we put together for doctors. So if your doctor's like, I've never done a letter like this before, I don't know what to put in it, give them this article. You can find it on the website. Everything on our website is free of copyright. You can print out and copy as many pages as you want. So after a poor performance evaluation, once upon a time, there was a teacher who brought in a doctor's note saying she had a genetic condition that was causing her performance to lag. And she said, I think I could benefit from an accommodation. Did she provide all the information that she needs to provide? I'm seeing some head shaking. You guys are right. She didn't describe the exact nature of her limitation, and she didn't provide precise information about what problems she was experiencing. If she wants an accommodation, she needs to share more with her employer. Step 3, exploring accommodation options. You can suggest things that you would like your employer to do, but they are free to choose other options if those options would work. So you need to keep an open mind. But you do have this opportunity to, again, suggest accommodations. If you know of a piece of equipment that your doctor, your ophthalmologist, your vision rehabilitation therapist has recommended, this is another good chance to mention it by name. And you can also call Jan and we will walk you through the range of products that we know are available. We will not tell you what to ask for because we don't make recommendations, but if you want to learn about the range of things that exist that might help you, we're a good place to contact. So once upon a time, a social worker with a vision impairment requested a reader/scribe, a person to sit with her, to help her with all of her keyboarding for case notes. How can we figure out some other options? Because most employers will not go for this. Outside of government, you're not going to get this. You could call the Job Accommodation Network at 1-800-526-7234. You could also try to get an assessment, try to get your doctor to refer you for an individualized assistive technology assessment. You could visit your state assistive technology project, where you can see and try things out in person. Some things that you might want to consider are assistive software and training on how to use it. You might also need hardware to go with that. And if you're already using something, you might want to check with your IT department to see if it needs updated, or to see if something your employer is using, like a database, needs to be modified with what we call scripting. Somebody might need to write some computer code to make your software work right so you can do your job. So getting help from HR and IT can also be helpful. On our website, we have the Searchable Accommodations resource. We call it SOAR. You can find it by just clicking on Search Accommodations Database. And you can use that as kind of a tool to guide your search. You can have the opportunity to select something like vision impairment, and then it'll prompt you to say, well, what are you having trouble doing on the job? And you can select, for instance, reading from print or using a computer. And once you click that, that will take you to a list of ideas and a list of vendors who sell those types of things. So askjan.org/SOAR is the direct link if you would want that. askjan.org/SOAR. And here is a screenshot of the Searchable Online Accommodations resource. So the last step 4 would be choosing an accommodation. This is where you and your employer together decide. Ultimately, the employer has the discretion to choose what they want to provide, but they need to choose something effective. If they give you something that does not work, you need to speak up. If you're trying to convince them to get product A over product B, let's say you want to convince them to get the Zoom text screen reader over, or Zoom text screen magnifier over something like Magic, you need to explain why, and why your choice would be the more effective. So here's an example. We have a customer service rep who wanted to work from home because of difficulty commuting. But the employer thought, no, we don't want to do that. You're going to feel isolated. Instead, we want you to work a different schedule, and then you can use public transportation to come to work. We think that employers and employees should talk to kind of work these things out before a decision is made. In this particular case, this was a real case. The employee wanted to work at home, so they weren't going to feel, unnecessarily isolated. And the employee expressed that to their employer. Step 5 is when you put the accommodation in place. It's when you actually implement the schedule, or you actually put the software on the computer, or you bring the new equipment to the workplace. You need to be prepared to offer your input on what's working and not working as that process unfolds. You want to be prepared to respond to the employer's questions. A lot of people kind of want to hide their cards when they're going through the accommodation process. They don't want their employer to know everything that they're thinking, or they don't want to make waves. But this is your opportunity to make a wave now so that your accommodation works for you and lets you stay on the job down the road. You want to get input from your medical providers if you need that. And if they're giving you a new piece of equipment or a new piece of software that you do not know how to use, it is okay to ask for training. So a secretary with vision loss could no longer read her office phone screen, couldn't tell who was calling, couldn't transfer calls very easily because those screens are small. You know, mine is like dark green print on light green. It's really hard to see. Her employer responded to her request by buying software, which probably Accessiphone, I would guess would be the name of this, that allowed her to get that information on the computer instead. She had screen reading software on her computer, and so she could listen to the information that most of us would read from a phone screen. She was able to listen to it through her computer, transfer calls through her computer. So how do you think someone who's helping you, like a voc rehab professional or an occupational therapist, might be able to help with this process? Well, this might need customized. The person might need some training on how to use it. They might even need an IT professional to make sure it gets properly integrated in the workplace. So it makes sense to tap into all of the resources that are available to you to make sure that this process goes smoothly. Step 6 is the last step. It's monitoring the accommodation. This is when the employer should be checking in with you to make sure that things are still working and that you don't need anything new or different. And this is where you as an employee should speak up if something isn't working. You want to know who to contact if there's a problem, and make sure that you are giving updates, especially if there is a problem with whatever type of equipment or accommodation you're using. And it doesn't have to be equipment either. If your employer's modified your schedule so that you can access public transportation, but the bus or the train routes change, you need to let them know. They can probably change your schedule again. So we encourage employers to tell their employees who to contact if there's a problem, but from a practical standpoint, you need to be proactive as well. So those are the 6 steps of the accommodation process. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I want to jump into my favorite part of the presentation, which is accommodation examples. And I'll get to that as soon as the slide changes. Oh, actually, we have a little bit of something about this piece. An auditor with progressive vision loss from macular degeneration. We don't always know the underlying condition when people contact us, but sometimes we do. They were using screen reading software, started using it a year ago, and the employer bought a new piece of database software, something new that they were using for all employees. Turned out that JAWS, the screen reader, wouldn't work with the new database. It happens more often than you would think. Could the employer have avoided this problem? What do you think? Oh, we gotta have new software, right? We gotta have a new database. They still could have avoided the problem. They knew that they had an employee with a vision need who was using assistive software. They knew or should have known that. So they could have planned ahead and made sure that the product that they were purchasing was compatible. Or someone from the IT department could have done some testing. So this should never happen, but in practice, it happens a lot, which is why I have a job answering calls all day, every day. So when they're changing something at work, you might need to speak up if you hear that you're getting new software. I had to do it myself, even at the Job Accommodation Network. When we were getting a new database, I went to my boss and I was like, you know that I use voice recognition software, right? You're testing it, right, to make sure that it's gonna work? And they said, yes, Teresa, we are. But it was still good for me to ask. Okay, and there's an article on this if you want to go in more depth. Now we get to the Jan study examples. This is my favorite part. So once upon a time, there was a healthcare worker with low vision. She was having difficulty using her computer. Not surprising, right? In Windows 7 and the later versions of Windows, there are a lot more accessibility features than there used to be like in XP. So the first thing the employer tried was a cheap move, but not a brilliant move. They tried upgrading the operating system. It was not effective. The employee spoke up and said, hey, this is better, but it's not exactly what I need. So then the employer purchased screen magnification software. On the screen, we have a photo of the box that the program Zoom Text comes in. Zoom Text is a screen magnifier. It makes the words and numbers and things on your screen bigger. It also makes them easier to see by adjusting the color of the background and the color of the print. So you can look at your computer with everything in yellow on black if that works best for you. Some of the versions of Zoom Text, especially the brand new one, Zoom Text Fusion, have screen reading capabilities as well. Zoom Text Fusion is it's a nice integration of two existing products, the top of the line screen magnifier and the best well-known screen reader. So it combines the ability to make things bigger and easier to see with the ability to listen to your computer or have your computer give you information in Braille. On the next screen, you're going to see the price for Zoom Text when this example was made. In that time period, it was $325. Now that they've combined it and made Zoom Text Fusion, it's over $1,000. So these prices do change. But remember, if your employer says it's too expensive, it needs to be too expensive based on the whole company or whole organization's total financial resources. So, $1,000, or I think this is actually $1,200 now, is a lot. It would be a lot for me. But for my employer, West Virginia University, they could probably swing it if I needed it. And the benefit to the employer was they were able to keep that highly skilled employee and also improve morale by showing that they really care about their employees' needs. When we do this study, one of the things we ask the employers to give us is what were the benefits that they as an employer got out of the accommodation process. Here's another example. Social service worker at a state agency had no vision, wanted a reader to help with accessing documents and information. Sometimes you can get this if you work for a government entity. So sometimes it's possible. We also hear of it at universities where they have a lot of grad students that need hours. So they actually did get this. Reader services were provided during half of every workday to this employee as their accommodation. Any idea how much it cost? It was spendy. It was about $1,000 a month. Yeah. An educator at a healthcare facility had a vision impairment, had a service dog, wanted to bring the dog to work. Do you think they allowed it? The employer said, yeah, okay, and we can let the dog go in most parts of our healthcare facility. But if you want to enter certain areas, we'd like some additional documentation about the dog, about the dog's health, about the dog's training. Like, for example, we don't take dogs in the OR. We can take dogs in the cafeteria, but federal law prohibits us from letting dogs go into the cafeteria kitchen, right? Yeah. But there was no cost to the employer to implement this accommodation. At the time of the follow-up, the employer said, everything's working, it's effective, and the employee brought the dog to work. If you want to know more about service animals, we have numerous links on our website. We even have a link that will tell you a little bit about state-level laws related to your service dog. A delivery driver, had a CDL, lost the CDL because of sudden onset vision loss. They went on short-term disability leave, which means they're getting a little bit of money while they're out on leave through an insurance program. The employer contacted Jan to see how they could get the employee back to work. Is he going to drive again? Probably no. So in this case, the employee was moved into a position that did not require driving. If there is no way for you to do your current position anymore, but there's another position open that you could do, you can ask for that as an accommodation under ADA. It's called reassignment. Okay. So I've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to wrap it up. If you need to file a complaint, you need to contact the EEOC. You can find them at eeoc.gov or at 800-669-4000. Now, if you get one digit off, you'll get somebody else who's pretty interesting. So 800-669-4000. There are also state-level laws that protect you. I'm not qualified to speak on those, but if you go to the JAN website, we have contact information for that entity in each state that has such an entity. So you can go to the JAN website and look for your state-level organization. If you are in a workplace with 15 or fewer employees, this might be your best option because Title I of the ADA only covers workplaces with 15 or more employees. If there are 5 people working where you work, you might still have some rights under a state-level law. Protection and advocacy agencies, independent living centers, state voc rehab, and your state AT project are also good places for you to check with. On this slide, we have links where you can find contact information for those places. You can also call. So the Job Accommodation Network is available 9 to 6, Monday to Friday, Eastern Time at 1-800-526-7234. You can also email us. And we also have a place on our website where you can enter a question and have it sent in through the website. Any questions? Yes?
What was that website again to get the slides?
Oh, the website to get the slides? It's askjan.org/landing page /LHON. I have that in all caps. I don't know if it matters. 2017. And then I have another / after that. So if you're not, put a / at the end. You can also email me at goddard@jan.wvu.edu and I will send it to you. Yes. Yes. Okay. So the question / comment was that state vocational rehabilitation agencies vary widely in how effectively they deliver their services and how much help they're able to provide and how quickly. So what are some other things that people can do, or how can you get good service out of state voc rehab? There isn't another option that's quite like state voc rehab. So if you're having issues with people getting back to you, I suggest you be a pest and get back to them frequently. Document your calls, don't give up, ask to be escalated to a supervisor if you need to, because there's not another place you can go to get the exact same thing. I also suggest working with your lawmakers to try to ensure that those services are well funded. But if you're not getting what you need through that route, you can call the Job Accommodation Network. We can talk with you about other resources. We might be able to refer you to other organizations where you can get some parts of the assistance you would usually get through state VR. So like for instance, I can tell you about a broad range of products for vision impairment, but I'm not qualified to recommend one. And although I have a lot of experience in that area, I'm not the best in the business. The man who is, in my opinion, is named Ike Presley, and he's at AFB. You may quibble with me on that, but I've been going to him for years with the questions that stump me, and he's very good at asking you questions to help tease out the information needed to get a good recommendation. There are also a lot of other good people at all of the other organizations related to blindness, but that's who I call when I get a stumper.
Understand correctly? And you said you work at a university. Does your university also have like a department or organization that helps students who need accommodation in their educational pursuits?
Okay, so the question was, are there provisions for educational accommodations, and does the university where I work have an office to assist students? Yes, most universities or even community colleges should have that. Students need to be proactive in finding out what office they need to go to receive accommodations. Again, the onus is on the student. It's not like when you're in K-12 and someone's responsible for figuring out if you need help. You need to figure out where to go. Almost every college or university is going to have someone you can contact. If you're having trouble finding someone to contact, you can call me and I'll try to help if I can. The rules are different because it's not Title I. It's going to typically be Title III. and the Department of Justice would be the enforcement agency. You can also file complaints with OCR at the Department of Ed.
I'm sure there are lots more questions, but we need to get to our next speaker. Teresa, thank you so much. Big round of applause.